and achievements of the Black community across the world. This year it's a particularly poignant theme, I think, which is time for change, action, not words. And fittingly at Queen Mary, we're really proud this year to showcase our biggest celebration to date. So we have a program of events, activities, and resources that are open to all students and staff. And I'd really encourage you to have a look at the website and see what else there is that might be beneficial and that you might enjoy. We have the Lunch and Learn series as one of our program points, and they are talks that celebrate research contributions that focus on race, ethnicity, and culture at Queen Mary. And we really hope you'll agree that they're a great opportunity to listen, to learn, and get food for thought on making changes that benefit us all. I've already said today I'm particularly excited that we are joined by Dr. Folashade Akinmolayan Taiwo, who will be presenting Intersectionality in Engineering, a Personal Reflection. And Dr. Taiwo is a senior lecturer in engineering education and director of student experience in the School of Engineering and Materials Science. Within the Faculty of Science and Engineering, she's also deputy director of the Center for Academic Inclusion in Science and Engineering. And in addition to being vice chair of the Neuro Researchers Network for the UK and Ireland Engineering Education Research Network, she is also part of this year's Queen Mary cohort, and I'm particularly excited to say that as the Aurora champion for the Aurora program, which is a prestigious female leadership program. And I know that you'll say a little bit about that as well, and how that fits into your biography. Prior to joining QMUL, she was a teaching fellow at UCL, where she also completed her master's in engineering and her PhD in chemical engineering. And her focus is on scholarship of engineering education, in particular researching into group work and engineering experiential learning, including inclusivity aspects of group formation, group dynamics in team-based learning and group teaching. She has a really great experience of working with students, which is also documented by many student-led awards and nomination, both in her student experience lead role and in her scholarship approaches, which have developed strategies that led to significant improvement of student experience indicators and SEMS. So we're already making great change there. In this particular talk, she will conduct a personal reflection on her current journey into academic leadership. She will review how intersectionality has informed her scholarship, the research in engineering education, her experience, academic progression, and also future goals, where I'm hoping Aurora comes in slightly. And just before I hand over, just a bit of housekeeping. If I could ask you, we will be recording this talk. In fact, we're already recording, as I can see. Thank you. I'd ask you to have your microphones and your cameras off just for the talk bit. And then when we come to questions, you're really welcome to turn cameras and microphones on again. I'm hoping that the talk will inspire many questions, and we have a full hour. So thank you for turning your cameras off. And there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. We'll hear the talk first, which will take half an hour to 40 minutes. Is that right? Roundabout. No need for precision in this one. We're very excited to have you, and the floor is all yours, Folashade.
Thank you, Katharina. It's always really embarrassing to hear the bio. But yeah, I'll just start sharing my slides. When I was approached to ask to do a talk about History Month, I decided to do a talk based on my intersectionality and engineering, and this really is a personal reflection. You can see from the title of my slide, I've also put how my name's pronounced. That will come into play into why I do that in this talk. But yeah, Folashade Akinmolayan Taiwo, and so I just want to start this talk by saying this talk is my experience, and I emphasize the my, because everyone's experience is very different and very unique. And so when it comes to intersectionality for me, being a Black woman, the fact that my ethnicity and race for me is my first dimension of my intersectionality, simply because when I email anybody in a professional setting, because I have a PhD, the doctor makes me gender neutral. So I don't know if I'm a man or a woman, but my name lets you know very quickly that I'm an ethnic minority. And so we have that element. I do have my pronouns in my email in my second line, and then you'll know my gender. But also when you see me, the first thing you'll identify or notice is I'm Black. So I often say that with me, my ethnicity and my race is the first level of my intersectionality. My gender is then second. And so this for me is a very personal reflection. And I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for all Black women in academia. And I've said a few other anonymous sources. You'll see why a bit later. But I just really wanted to emphasize that this is about me, my journey, my experiences, and my reflections. To outline what I'll be talking about, I'm going to show you a couple of key moments that changed my life. Also talk about some motivations and drive that I had, and then really just go into reflecting on my previous journey and how that's impacted and also supporting my future journey for my future goals. So I'll just start by showing this particular email that came from a student. And I've tried to anonymize it as much as I can. And so with a background to this particular email, there are a few things that really strike me about it. The first thing for me is the time that it's sent, close to 1 a.m. So I had a lecture early in the morning. So this student had a whole day to think about it before they sent me this email, where a colleague continually butchered my name and then laughed about it and then said, "You have a very hard name," and left it like that. Now, I had many emotions at the time this occurred. Most of it was anger. But when I got this email, it turned into hurt, because this was a student who was in the room at the time, and not only were they apologizing for what occurred, but they were telling me that this happens to them, and they were hoping that one day people will learn to say our names. And this really impacted the way moving forwards I reacted to people saying my name, because when you choose to not learn a colleague's name, not only are you disrespecting them, but actually everyone else in the room is affected by what's occurred and what has happened. And so this was one of the defining moments within my career, where I thought, I actually won't allow people to say my name incorrectly, nor will I allow you to laugh about it, nor would I allow you to make light of the situation when you should really be embarrassed by what's just happened. Because I was embarrassed, probably more so than the colleague was. And the fact that the student emailed me at 1 a.m. when they probably should have been asleep meant that they ruminated on it all day. So that really, really actually affected and impacted me, because not only was it just me and that colleague, there were other colleagues in the room at the time, and no one stood up for me or even said anything about what just occurred, but a student did. So that was one of the defining moments. Another more positive defining moment was when I received this email. And this was actually from another colleague who was a professional member of staff. They emailed me basically saying that for them, and they also identified as a person of color, that seeing someone who had a BAME background in an academic position was inspiring. And so for me, the fact that another colleague went out of their way to email me was really positive, and it just let me, or reminded me, that I'm on the right track and representation really does matter to everyone, not just myself. So those were the two. I've had other key defining moments, but those are the two that I wanted to share. So if we look into my journey and where I currently am, in 2022, I am currently Director of Student Experience in the School of Engineering and Material Science. So within my role, I lead the Student Experience Committee. I also chair the Student Staff Liaison Committee, but I have a team of people that I work with, and they are amazing. Within our committee, our remit is to design, implement, and lead the school strategy on student experience and really identify how it fits in within the core Queen Mary values. Without blowing my horn too much or blowing the horn of our committee, we've done very, very well. with the build up to this particular point. And I can talk about that another time or if there's questions about it. I'm also one of the deputy directors within the Centre for Academic Inclusion in Science Engineering. So within that, I'm leading the implementing of inclusive curriculum within programs within science and engineering. And so this is a very new centre that's opened. It's a virtual centre. We do have a launch on the 31st of October. I'm kind of hoping someone else in the chat can drop in the Eventbrite in case anyone's interested in coming to that launch. And then you'll see more about what that centre does, or what we inspire to do is what I should say. And I'm also a senior lecturer in engineering education. I just realized I abbreviated that. I'm not sure why I did, but I'm a senior lecturer in engineering education within the school. And so I'll come back to that point when I get back through my journey to this point to talk about what my scholarship in this area is, how I got there, and what I aim to do moving forwards. So we're now going to look through a timeline of past, future, present, a bit like that Christmas movie. So between now and retirement, with my fantastic squiggle line, I have a couple of aims, and these are the key aims. I'll have intermediate aims in between it, but these are the key aims that I hope to achieve. I want to become a National Teaching Fellow. I want to become a professor in engineering education, and I want to be in university level senior leadership, focusing on student experience. Now, how I'm going to get there, we'll see. I'm on track within the academic leadership positions that I have within my school, and also really with the support that I have available within my school. But I have this squiggle line because, you know, no one's path is a straight journey. But when I think about where I want to be, I think about what the current state of higher education is. And so we're just going to look at some facts that I have to face on a daily basis. So the Higher Education Systems Agency, HESA, it publishes the data for all sorts of academic things, but the ones I'm going to focus on is the professors. So as of last year's data, we had 22,000 approximately professors within the UK. And within that number, 29% were women. So with the women percentage of professors usually stay between 28, 29 over the last 2 years. So that hasn't really grown. But that number is still a lot higher than the Black, Asian, or other minority ethnic percentage of professors. So there were 11% that identified as Black, Asian, or minority ethnic. So when I think about my interdisciplinary, intersectionality and that nature, as a woman, I celebrate the fact that there's 29% is still not a lot. But when I think about the fact that I'm a Black person, I look at 11% and I think that's much less. Now, if I think about how many actual Black people there were who were professors, we're at 0.7%. So that's 160 people out of 22,855. Now my intersectionality means I'm not just a Black person, I'm a Black woman. So to find that data, I had to go to a different website, and I found that there were 41 Black female professors in the UK, but none of them were known to be in engineering. So I look at that and I think about my goals, and I think if that statement of you can't be what you cannot see is true, then it's really hard for me to achieve that goal if I believe that. So I am on track to try and change the statistics that I see, but this is the stats that are currently there. It's the ugly truth that this is the data that I am faced with when I think about what my future in academia looks like. And so I remember, and I will talk about, I'll show you a tweet in a second, a couple of years ago after the murder of George Floyd, when I think all Black people were mourning about this situation, because on social media, we were constantly being told that simply because we are Black, we are worth less. And so I started to reflect, as I think most of us did, what my position in life was. And so this was 2 years ago, and I then looked at the stats again because I was really considering leaving academia at that point in time. That, again, I pointed out that there were no Black women professors in engineering, or not many at all within the stats. And something happened that I now identify happens more often than not, but I chose to ignore it, where I am talking about my intersectionality and how that affects me, and someone chose to move it into the space of female engineers, women in engineering. And I do identify as women engineering because that is who I am, but I am intersectional. And so when I'm choosing to talk about my intersectionality, it often gets washed over with, but what about women in engineering? And I'm okay with that and it's fine. But when I'm talking about a particular aspect that affects me in particular and on my particular journey, rather than being heard, it was questioned or gaslit. And so I did respond and I gave the person some resources they can look at. And the reason why I didn't bother to anonymize this is it's on Twitter, so you could figure out who it is anyway. But this just shows some of the elements when I choose to talk about my intersectionality, in particular my race, what sometimes occurs. So I'm now going to go through my journey as to how I got to where I got to and how it's impacted this scholarship that I now do. So between childhood and when I started university, I was born and raised in West London in a family of 7 of us. And so I've got 4 siblings. So there's quite a lot of us. I'm a second generation immigrant. So my parents moved to the UK for university and stayed. So me and all my siblings were born and raised in the UK in West London. And in particular, in the neighborhood that I grew up in and the school that I went to, it was an all-girls school, which had a very similar demographic to Queen Mary. So we had higher than the national average for students who came from disadvantaged backgrounds and students whose first language was not English. But interestingly enough, even though being a Black student, I was an ethnic minority there as well, I didn't notice it because we all had cultural similarities that we celebrated, like the fact that we weren't allowed out after school, we didn't have mobiles, we couldn't have boyfriends, etc. Like we bonded over so much that the fact that I was a Black student in that school and one of the few Black students in that school, it didn't even impact how I saw myself. But something changed between university and thereafter. So I joined university 2007 and I was there till 2011 when I got my master's. And on the first day of university, one of my really good friends now loves to say this story about how she called me Shade on the first day. And I corrected her instantly. I was like, my name's not Shade, it's Shade or Sade, whichever you want to say it, but it's not Shade. And that reminds me that in 2007, I had pride in my name. Like, I'm Nigerian, all our names had meanings. And I was very prideful. I was very happy with my name. And so I corrected her. And along the way, something happened during my university experience that I stopped correcting people and I allowed people to call me Shade. And so it clearly wasn't before I got to university, because that story really shows that I had pride at that point in time. But I think it was just constantly having people call me Shade because they read it, just had me stop correcting it because it started to get more embarrassing for me to correct it. And there's something that I will say for the fact that because I have an ethnic name, more often than not, the characters are not said with English phonics. And so, yeah, Shade. It might look like Shade, but it's probably best asking, what's your name? Or how do I pronounce your name? Even if you think you know how to say it, it's worth asking just in case you get it wrong. I noticed, and it's something I didn't really acknowledge that I noticed then, but there were no Black members of staff within my undergrad. So, and that was neither at professional services nor in the academic level. There just weren't any. And so when I became aware I was an ethnic minority, I think I did what most students do, was I started to find places that I could identify with. So I joined the Afro-Caribbean Society. And so there were a group of people who were Black within this institution that didn't have many Black students. And I also had to work on weekends. As I said, I was a family of 7. At this point in time, 2 of my sisters were in university. So it was quite a financial burden on my father. So we all took weekend jobs. And the fact that I acknowledged that I had to do this plays a big part in my scholarship, because I look at group work and how the fact that cultural and social differences impact students. Because I was the student who had to work on weekends, I couldn't work necessarily and do academic work on weekends without it impacting the way I needed to financially afford my lifestyle. So during 2011 to 2016, I was doing a PhD in chemical engineering. I started a job during this time, so my PhD time extended a little bit. But I was doing a PhD in chemical engineering at this point in time. Along the bottom of the screen, you'll see what I will call my not so humble bragging, where I'm going to highlight different awards that I won at certain intervals within my time period. So I started a PhD, and I didn't really identify at the time, but I actually gravitated and looked towards a female leader who I wanted as my supervisor. So she was very impactful in her field, but not only that, she taught me in undergrad, and I just thought she was a fantastic lecturer, and her presence was something that I wanted to emulate. And so when it came time to look for PhDs and really identify with someone, I went for a female leader. And so that was my first mentorship experience where I felt I could almost identify with someone. And she was a white woman, so our ethnicities were very different, but she was an immigrant. And so we got to talk about that, and we really bonded on what that meant within engineering and things like that. But it did really start to shape how I viewed myself in engineering, because I was a woman in engineering and we were a minority. And so I found at least a minority that people could identify with within engineering that I could talk about. And so, interestingly enough, or uninterestingly, depending on the stats you look at, I was also, once again, a minority within the PhD, because I was the only UK Black student who was there. So there wasn't many Black students doing PhDs, but the ones that were all international. And so as the UK Black student within the department, it became more interesting at conferences where there weren't many Black students anywhere at these conferences. But whenever I would speak, people would ask me how long I had been in the UK for. And so it really highlights the fact that it wasn't uncommon for people to either assume that any ethnic minority doing a PhD was international, but also it highlighted ignorance in this area where it showed that because I was doing a PhD and because there wasn't many UK Black students who chose to do PhDs, people just assumed we didn't exist. And so in conferences, again, similarly to my undergrad, I did what I always did to be comfortable. I found the other Black PhD students, and we actually became really good friends. I ended up being a bridesmaid for one of them. And so we found that at these conferences, because of our field, it was the same people you saw. But again, during this time, people called me shade and I just didn't correct them. And so there was something that happened that you'll see during 2014 to 2018 that really started to change why and how I let people get away with that. So because I was constantly trying to, I guess, find a sense of belonging in my environment, I started to initiate outreach events. And this started with undergraduate students, and then I expanded it out to pre-university students. And I was doing this in the forms of creating summer schools, creating workshops, doing days of just understanding or believing who you are within engineering. And so through all of these various different things that I created, I got awarded a Provost Engineering Engagement Award. And it just started off by something that I was passionate about doing. And then it grew into more events. And then I started doing it more and more with the faculty that I was in. I really enjoy it. I still do a lot of outreach, and interesting enough, I do talks like this to a lot of pre-university students to just for them to see a role model, but also to understand it's okay to really start to question your environment. And something to highlight that I didn't notice then, but I am highlighting now, I still didn't have other Black members of staff in that time period within the department that I was in, and that was neither in professional services nor academic members of staff. So I did say I started working. at that point in time. So I became the first Black and also female colleague within my department. A year later, they hired another, which was great. She was international, and we talked a lot about intersectionality and engineering, what it means. But there was another Black colleague hired, and she was also a woman. So that became a very interesting experience. But what I found during that period of time was my intersectionality meant that people weren't used to seeing staff members who looked like me. And so I had various experiences that occurred that meant I found myself in very awkward situations. So a particular example was I missed a particular meeting, and there was me, who was a member of staff, and another Black PhD student at the time, who was a teaching assistant, who we were supposed to go to a meeting. I didn't go, she went. And when I said, oh, I didn't go to the meeting, what did I miss? Another colleague was like, oh, yes, you were there. And I had to repeat, no, I wasn't there. And she was adamant that I was there. So after much back and forth, it came out that because the other the teaching assistant was there, who was Black, and we looked nothing alike. She was tall, she's more slender, and she's actually fairer skinned than I am, was there. She didn't acknowledge or even notice that I wasn't there. And when I confronted her about this, her reason was, I don't see difference in faces, and that's why I didn't realize she wasn't new. And when she said this in the meeting, I think everyone else went quiet. I went quiet for a bit, and eventually I just got up and left, because it just felt really uncomfortable, the fact that this was a colleague that I thought would know who I am. And when it came to the fact that I wasn't there, the defense was basically Black people look alike. And so it made me really uncomfortable in that space. Now, things did occur and things happened, and, you know, I did get an apology and etc. But that has stuck with me since. It was just a very awkward situation that I found myself in. Another instance, and this happens more often than not, even still to today, unfortunately, where I walked into a meeting and it was instantly assumed that I was a postgraduate teaching assistant, even though I was there in the capacity of a staff member. And so because of my intersectionality, I can't tell, and I couldn't tell at the point in time, is it because of my age, because I was young? Was it because they weren't expecting to see a Black person walk in? Or I don't know, but this occurred, and it does occur to me frequently. And so when that kept occurring, I didn't really have time to process my emotions. But that was really the first time I started to experience professional mentorship. And there was a group of ladies, that we called ourselves the Ladies at Lunch Club, who we met. And so this is the only pictures I'll show of people, because these three women really impacted how I started to view myself and how I started to relate and interact with a variety of people. So we have Emmanuella, Kate, and Alpida. And so they all are leaders in their retrospective spaces. And so not only was I inspired by these three women, I also was listened to and mentored by these three women, because they provided a space, and a safe space. It was lunch we were having, where I could explain certain situations that are occurring, and they would listen, and they would almost always challenge me and motivate me to do something about it, or to really think about why I was affected and what I can do about it. And I'm naturally a very shy person, although that might not come across in this presentation. I'm very, very shy, and I'm slightly awkward at the best of times. And so these three women would put me in spaces where I had no choice but to like present and be myself, and they would motivate me and really be my allies in certain rooms that I went in. So I always say these women will never know, like, I can't ever explain in words what they mean to me, because they did so much for me at a time period in my life when I didn't quite identify why I was being affected by certain things that were happening, but they supported me. So those are my ladies at lunch. And so also during this time, I had male allies. And it's unfortunate that being an ethnic minority in a space where there's not many of us, I have to say that I was lucky to have these male allies, because they would be in rooms and in conversations that I weren't in, and they would talk about me. And because they would talk about me and the work that I did and how great they thought I was, I got invited into those spaces. And it is luck, because during my PhD, I had many, other Black colleagues or students who were doing amazing in their work, but I made it through to academia and they didn't. And it was because I had those advocates and those allies who spoke for me, who vouched for me, and who were able to really put me into spaces that I wouldn't necessarily get into. And so during this time, especially in my days at Lunch Club, I started to really dive into my scholarship, and reflecting on it was really driven by the experiences that I had. So I started looking into group work, in particular group work within engineering education. And so I started looking at problem-based learning and assessment design. And so that was how we could incorporate sort of industrial aspects within group work or within projects in order to get students interested or intrigued by it. And assessment design was driven by the fact that, within literature, you can see yourself that certain designs of assessments really are beneficial to certain criteria of students. And this could, also be disadvantageous to other students, such as students with neurodiversity or students with certain cultural backgrounds or things like that. And so I became really interested in how can we design group work to really empower our students to have good experience, but also how they can get a range of skills in order to enhance their current sense of belonging. And then I started looking at team dynamics, and I giggle when I think about team dynamics because I think that was really driven by the fact that I had 4 siblings. And we were a big group or team, and my siblings are all very strong characters, and I'm actually the quiet one within my siblings. And so it was, how does being in a group with having all these different characters affect the experience you're having? And I really draw upon my experience growing up with a group of other kids to really look into literature about various elements that I'm thinking about, or really utilize it to inspire what my thought processes are. So that sort of brings me on to the next stage of my life, where I moved institutions. And when I moved institutions, I was first given a probation mentor who was a white man. And once again, he was one of my biggest allies that I had with the institution. He would also nominate me for talks and workshops, put me into spaces. I would tell him about how uncomfortable and how shy I am, and we would have deep conversations about that. And so even though I didn't have someone who was ethnically the same as me, or even a woman with that diversity, having that ally or advocate was really powerful to me, because it once again showed me another form of leadership that I could really sort of see skills that I liked. Another ally that I had his own version of intersectionality, and me and him would talk a lot about our intersectionalities and how it's affected our lives. But not just that, it's also how our intersectionalities have been brought into our scholarship or our research in engineering education. And so again, there's a variety of people that I've met. And I keep saying this, that I'm lucky to have conversations with and to have supported me, who have impacted the way that I've been interacting. And so within my school, I've got a variety of leadership positions, and that means I get to chair a variety of committees, but also I've got a lot of female allies. And so this stems from senior management leader allies, all the way up into professional services leader female allies. And in particular, I have these 2 professional services staff who are both leaders in their retrospective spaces, who keep me sane, to be very honest. And I rely on their support when situations occur and I'm not quite sure how to feel about it. I often speak to them, and both of them are very different. One has intersectionality of her own. Actually, both have intersectionality, but one intersectionality because we talk a lot about our kids and about, what we want to empower in them and how we want them to identify with. And so I get to have these conversations outside of my professional settings to really just think about what's occurred to me. And I do think I'm lucky in the school that I'm in, where my race is not a factor. Being a woman is also not a factor within my school. but it does mean I'm left in this bubble. So once I leave my bubble and I interact with the wider Queen Mary experience, I do have instances where I do have microaggression or tokenism, and and that's where I talk about the fact that I'm now once in a space where I'm back to correcting people about my name, where I say my name is not shade. And I didn't say this, but actually it was during the Ladies at Lunch Club that they empowered me to remind people about my name, because in that space between 2007 up until between 2014, I lost the will to keep correcting people on my name. And so it was the Ladies at Lunch that reminded me, no, your name has meaning, your name has power, you shouldn't let people not call you who you are, that I started to remind myself that I should tell people my name's not shade. So I find that I have to do that outside of my school quite often. I have experienced various microaggressions and tokenism. For example, when I first joined Queen Mary, I was asked for my picture to be taken to be part of a report on the gender equality pay gap. And when I questioned why, because I wasn't on the committee who wrote that report, nor had I read the report, I was told because it would be inspirational for other people to see a person like me in academia. And I was really offended, because not only did you not care for my contribution, you wanted to tokenize me in order to pretend you had this this person who, who's a Black woman who had contributed to something that I did not. So I politely declined. But still, I'm angry about it, as you can tell, because I brought it up in this story. Because, yeah, situations like that are not fair, nor are they comfortable when I have to constantly explain why I don't want to do certain things. There's Royal Academy of Engineering that's getting more and more diverse. But again, I couldn't identify with it a couple of years ago, because what they showcased were white men and white women, and they celebrated the fact that they were very diverse. But being a Black woman, I don't identify with either of those categories. So now they're showing more Black women and more Black men who are becoming fellows that I can identify with it a bit more. But also, as much as I love my school, this isn't a negative on them. I'm just highlighting something that's a fact. I don't have any Black academic colleagues within my school. I do have some postdocs who I speak to often about this fact. But yeah, so as you can see, the consistent story that I'm telling is throughout my period of time, I haven't had an academic who was Black, who was either my colleague or a member of staff when I was a student. So this leads me back to my current day and situation as a senior lecturer in engineering education. So my scholarship has evolved. So I still look at group work, and I still focus on peer assessment and problem-based learning and the engagement of students within those experiences. But actually, I think my overarching scholarship is student experience. So I look about the cultural and social impacts on various things beyond group work as well. And I also look about how diversity and inclusion within engineering impacts students' sense of belonging. So I have evolved based on some of the experiences that I've had, and the reflections that I've been doing makes me want to identify how can I help other students who are following a similar track to what I was doing, and what I can do to help them before they get to the stage that I'm currently at. So how do I want to get to my 2022 to retirement path? Well, I've started on Aurora. And so that's a women's leadership development program. And so on this program, I'm hoping I can identify what makes me a leader. Because as I said, I've been given leadership positions and opportunities within my school, but I do still have imposter syndrome. And so I often question why I'm there and how am I a leader and what does that even mean? And so Aurora is really, I joined it to really just identify what skills do I want to embody, and how can I continue to develop my confidence and self-awareness in this space. So far, we've been shown so many fantastic speakers. My current favorite was Melanie Isube, who has an MBE, who we saw in the last session. And mostly with Aurora, I'm just hoping I'll be able to identify how can I influence a wider change within QMEL. Because like I said, this university, it reflects the school that I went to. So I'm very passionate about the students who are here and what they see and how I can influence it. But not only that, from a personal point of view, I have a daughter. And so I'm honestly asking myself, like, what do I want my daughter to see in herself when she is a Black woman in any industry that she chooses to go to? And the man in the background is my husband thinking he can swim. So that's me in my 30 to 40 minutes. And so I can stop here to ask if there are any questions or comments or any stories anyone wants to share.
Well, first of all, for me, thank you so much. I have lots and lots of questions and comments going on in my head, but I'm going to keep it really brief to enable people, other people to get their questions in. I just wanted to apologize very quickly for stumbling over your name. You very patiently coached me through it, and I really, really wanted to get it right and didn't, so sorry for that. One more housekeeping point that I forgot to make as well, another point, a housekeeping point that I forgot to make as well, is that the recording will probably pop up in the team chat. We're just asking you not to share the recording any further. I was really taken with how you were talking about sort of humble bragging and embarrassing, that it was embarrassing to sort of see your biography. I think at some point you said, I don't want to overly show my achievements. And I thought it seems almost impossible to do that, you know. And yeah, it was really impressive to see your achievements and your well-founded ambitions. I like that you have a plan all the way up to retirement as well. I was really impressed with that. And I was really sort of even more impressed with your sort of courage and determination to keep making your point, even when you had the experiencing of people not listening. And it really makes a difference to hear the lived experience behind the shocking statistics and the timelines that you shared. So thanks so much for being here and for keeping going. And it's just really appreciated. So before we move into the questions, I'll invite people to turn on their cameras again, their microphones, if they like, and just express their appreciation of this wonderful talk. Thank you so much. And with that, I also open the floor to questions, comments. Thank you so much. It's really appreciated. So feel free to sort of raise your hand electronically. Hazel, we have the first question already.
Brilliant, thank you. Shadi, you probably can't see us all, can I? Do you want to?
I can see you.
Yeah, can you see us? I just thought you can unshare if you wanted to.
I will do that too.
But yeah, be nice to see you in big, not in a little corner of the screen. There we go. Brilliant, thank you. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. It's really interesting. I have a question for you, and it's something I've been trying to, be reflecting on for a while and trying to think about how we best approach this. And it's a bit about, you're sort of talking about the seeing me and having the mentorship, and it feels like a catch-22. It's really difficult that when you don't have people in roles, how do you provide the mentorship to support people to be able to see? And we have to start somewhere to start to address this. And one of the things with the sort of committee structures we're setting up is I really want to get us with a better mentorship scheme in the school. And there's mentorship, as you said, around probation and things. That's really good. This is different. This is about the sort of mentorship of how to support people to feel confident, to see role models, to see themselves, to feel that the career pathway is there. What's your reflection? What would have helped? Is there anything you think, I really wish that somewhere had done something a bit differently? Or you could say now, I really wish in the school you could do this for me to make that seem a bit less, because the stats are dire, aren't they? What do you really wish we could do in the school that might somehow make those stats seem less catastrophically far away?
So what I'll say is my experience is, like I said, very unique and very different in the sense of I've had fantastic mentors and allies, and more often than not, they were men. So like in my previous institution, I had a fantastic male who was a white man, and I still bug him to today, who really put me in spaces that I wouldn't have been in. And so even in the school, I highlight there's no other black. I don't have another black colleague who is like me, right? So, but what I will say in the school, I showed you the emails that I get from other people who acknowledge that I'm in positions that they didn't see. And I'm not saying going promote me, like that's really not what I'm saying. It'd be nice, but that's not what I'm saying. But it is within the school. It's just if there's just not the people there, it's hard to say get them there. But beyond this school, and I'm literally talking about beyond the school, if I look up, I don't identify because they're just not there. And so I guess having more people come in who are there and speak about how they got there, or even to just talk about their journeys or just reflect on how they got to those positions, then that's inspirational as well. Because you don't have to be in the institution to talk about the path and the progress and what you've achieved, because you could do it somewhere else. And so I think even just telling me, hey, have you heard about this other person in that institution? That's powerful, because like I said, I personally don't know of any Black academic in engineering, but someone else might. And they can go, oh, have you met this person? They're a reader, or they're an associate professor, or, you know, and then that can help someone like me who can't see it or can't find them myself. So it's those conversations. And I think it's having the conversations is what's also important as well.
Mm. Mm.
Thank you. Any other questions, Folashade? Anyone else? Patrick, yeah.
Hi, Sade, thanks for the talk. Learned some things about you that I didn't know, which is quite nice. But yeah, so I guess my question was, I don't know, about this, I'm thinking about the mentoring thing that you were reflecting on just then, as well as the sort of being able to see people in positions you'd like to be in, or, you know, anyone would like to be in, I guess. What is it? I got the impression that it was kind of the casual nature of these three lady mentors of yours was kind of a big part of the effectiveness of it. So, and I think I'm trying to think of how we could make that a sort of system in the school. Do you think that was a factor, just the sort of the casual nature of it, that you weren't talking about these? I don't know. Well, how did those meetings go? And I'm trying to dig out something useful, basically.
So what I can say, so one of them, Emmanuella, was actually officially my mentor.
Right.
And so she was my mentor first. And then through that, she was like, have you met these other women?
Right.
And I had met them like sort of sporadically, but she really brought us all together. And yeah, we became friends. The ladies at lunch became more of a friendship circle, I think, like a support friendship circle than a mentorship experience. But it became both, because we would all go there and talk about various things that were affecting us. And I guess because it was casual, like you said, but also we would have conversations about professional environments,
yeah,
and how we would react to it or how we can talk about it. That it still stayed on mentorship, even though we were friends as well.
Yeah. Okay.
But it grew. The friendship grew through our Ladies at Lunch club.
So it sort of ended up you're all mentoring each other in a way. Is that? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I think so.
So it wasn't like it didn't feel like a sort of hierarchical thing, really.
No, not at all.
Okay.
But I think a lot of, and I think that's why I keep saying I'm uniquely, and I'm going to keep saying this because I've had conversations. A lot of my mentorship experiences have been like that. They've been quite natural. We've had conversations. And even though I was getting a lot of wisdom from them, it didn't feel hierarchical at all.
Right.
I think if it did, I think I would shy away from that interaction.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Okay, thanks very much, Sade.
Thank you so much. And the next hand up was from Angela. Angela, if you'd like to go.
Yes, Sade, you started to talk about your intersectionality and the bearing that it had on your research and your educational offering. How can we support students to feel like they belong? What what is there that we can take away from what you've said today?
I think that's what I'm researching.
Well, that's great.
So yeah, when I have some answers, I'll publish it. But yeah, that's definitely what I'm researching.
Well, that's great. So that's given you a really, really good way of plugging your research. We shall look out for that publication. Thank you very much for the question, Angela, and for yours as well, Patrick. The next person with a hand up is Grace. If you want to unmute and ask your question or type it in the chat, whatever is easier for you, Grace.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Somebody sent me this invite, so I am very happy to be here. Thank you very much, Dr. Folashade. As a fellow Nigerian, I can definitely understand what you're saying about the mispronunciation of names, as it was something I experienced from primary school. But I have kind of many questions, the first of which is, can I reach out to you via LinkedIn? Because I'm particularly fascinated in kind of STEM and early education, just seeing the kind of lack of representation around that field, just in a personal capacity, and just knowing that there's not very many, I suppose, things that encourage women to go into certain fields when it comes to, those kinds of developmental toys and access to them. But I was going to ask you, how do you battle imposter syndrome? And I mean, I'm not saying it's like a conquered journey for anyone, but it'd be great to know. And also, do you have any thoughts on the kind of STEM area when it comes to early education, particularly, you mentioned you have a daughter. I have nieces, and I'm kind of obsessed with finding kind of STEM toys at the moment. So do you have any thoughts on the kind of level of representation when it comes to developmental toys available? And those are my questions. Thanks.
Okay, so the first one you asked was about imposter syndrome, right? So how do I battle it? Every day. I had in Aurora, we had a talk from, I put her in there, Michelle Isube, who talked a lot about imposter syndrome. And I think the way she described it was fantastic, because she was like, the more you grow in your career or in your path, you get put into uncomfortable situations where you feel like an imposter. But the more comfortable you become, the less of an imposter you feel. And then as you grow, it happens again. So she was like, so if you don't feel like an imposter, you're not growing in the spaces that you're in. And that really stuck with me, because I constantly feel like an imposter, because I'm constantly, willingly or unwillingly, put in spaces where I need to either talk, and I'm naturally quite shy. And I know, again, that doesn't come across here. And I do think the way I was raised plays a big part in it, where I said my two parents came from university, and my dad worked in the government, where he was the only Black man in his team, and my mum had her own business. And so the way my dad's raised us was do really well, but stay quiet, stay under the radar. And the way my mum raised us was very be loud and proud of who you are. And so it was constantly battling those ideals of, do I stay quiet and just do work and stay under the radar, or do I stay loud and proud? And so it's often, for me, how I don't have a how to battle imposter syndrome. I still have it. Before today's talk, I was very nervous. I was emailing Catherine and being like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. Like, I still have it. And I actually know many people in senior positions who still have imposter syndrome. And that sort of made me smile, because I thought, well, at least I'm not alone. But also made me worry, because I thought, oh, that means it never goes away. But it's, I honestly don't have a how I battle it. I take it day by day, situation by situation. But I do have a good group around me who are happy to hear me talk about how I feel like an imposter. And then they uplift me by, I call it, embarrassment and like humble bragging, but they remind me of everything that I've achieved and why I deserve to be in whatever space that I'm going into. Because I often forget to do it myself. So that's sort of how I'm currently navigating imposter syndrome. In terms of toys, I've got these really fantastic set of books that say my mummy is an engineer, and you can customize what the color of the people within those books are. So she's got a bunch of like toys that show representation of various different skin colors, skin tones, different things. And in terms of toys, me and my husband are both engineers. So it means she's got a lot of dorky toys. So she's got a lot of Lego, a lot of building blocks, a lot of like magnet connectors. She's only like 1.5, by the way. So she really can't play with them appropriately. But we enjoy it. So, you know, as she grows, we will get more and more STEM-based toys. But there are, if you email me, you've got to LinkedIn me, so I'll look for you, or email me. I'll send you a website link that I was sent from someone else, which shows a bunch of toys that you can use for STEM. So there you go.
This is amazing. Thank you so much. What an excellent question, Grace. We have 2 minutes left together, and I'm really conscious of finishing on time. Gabriel, I'm going to give you 30 seconds for your question, and Sade, you 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer it.
Yeah, very quickly. I was just reflecting on what.
Sorry, Gabrielle, you're a bit low.
Oh, is it better now?
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate of actually having access to having these informal conversations with you, Sade, and actually thinking of like, yeah, the target is changing those horrible statistics, but is framing the pathway there the same as a target part of the problem? Because what I wanted to ask is like, are you aware how much of a mentor you are to others when you've got those informal conversations? And therefore, actually, and while it's important to have that visibility in terms of seeing yourself, but also whether we turn it around precisely by actually not framing it in some kind of like deficit issue, that actually that not burdening you at the same time, that very difficult balance on you having to be that presence, but for more people to benefit on having those amazing conversations with you and others in similar positions is part of actually how we provide also those networks with the resources we have while we're changing the picture. I don't know, what do you think about that?
And I'm always very happy to have the conversations. I think it gets more burdensome for me when it's gaslit, because I think if you want to have the conversations, it should be an open conversation, not a how do you know, or why is that the case? You know, when that occurs, that's when I shut off and I think, well, this conversation isn't actually worth happening. And then that's when it becomes a burden. But I'm actually always happy to have conversations. I'm a chatty person in conversational spaces. But yeah, I don't find it burdensome, but I will say before my time runs out, interestingly enough, I did tell some friends I was going to do this talk, and they instantly went, you shouldn't, because they're going to make you the EDI lead. And so, but that's a genuine concern a lot of ethnic minorities have. If they talk about these things, then they become the spokesman and the face and the person who would have to spend all their time, you know, educating the masses. So yeah, I'm personally happy to have those conversations. I don't want to be EDI lead, but I am happy to have those conversations.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we really do appreciate the time that you have given today. We won't make you EDI lead quite yet then. But yeah, thanks so much for your time and for your courage and your persistence and your optimism in the face of all that that's difficult. That's been, yeah, I think everyone here will agree that that's been really inspirational, and it's sort of triggered a lot of thinking in me as well. So I'm sure sort of I'll be thinking about something tomorrow and thinking, oh yeah, that was a very good point. So thank you so much. What remains to me for me to say, apart from that big thank you and appreciation, is that Lunch and Learn is a series. So we have the next talk on Monday, 24th of October, about religion as liberal politics. So if some of you are able to join us, we'd really happily have you, and do check out the wider program for Black History Month as well. Thank you so much for attending today, and a final thank you to Sade. It's really appreciated. That was a great and inspiring talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for being here. Thank you.